Hello everyone, welcome to this week's web tips. I'll be presenting your web tips today. My name is Tom Dempsey. Today's logistics is everyone is going to be on mute. There'll be no polls, so you don't have to worry about that. And if there are any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in chat. My name is Tom Dempsey. I've been with CPS now for 3.5 years. I've created enterprise solutions since 2012. Mainly I've utilized different form and workflow platforms. At CPS, I've worked closely with customer, vendor, and BP processes, from create to change, single form processes to modular approach. Today's session will be some composer tips and tricks. We're going to be talking about repeating web services, when to use them, how to use them, what to avoid, working with subgroups, when to use them and the benefit of using them, and then we're talking about some copy rule functionality, when to use it and the benefit of using them. So repeating web services. Sometimes there's a requirement in a given project that the client would like to update multiple customers or multiple materials at one time. Or for a customer or vendor, they want to update the payment terms in the sales org or company code and the company codes that customer exists in. Now, in order to do that, we need to create a Winshuttle script that updates those fields in SAP. And then I'm going to show you how to import that said script into Composer so that you can update the multiple entries in SAP. So currently, there's get my demo going here. Currently, there's two ways to import a repeating web service. One is through creating a new solution through the GUI. So if I go to Composer and I say new solution, and I'm going to say test web services, I'm going to define the form site, and then I'm going to click next. Here you can insert any swim lanes if you like. I'm not going to do that today. And then you can also do any data connections that this solution is going to use, any field packs, and then lastly scripts. So from here, if I was going to import a repeating web service script, I'm going to click add. I'm going to find the file, and for example today we're going to use this customer company code. We're going to click open. We're going to click next, and then here you're going to be prompted with some information to fill out. The description is, what is this script going to be doing? You can keep it fairly generic, or you can get as detailed as you like. So I'm going to say update customer company code data. The group name, I also like to give it a name that resonates with the script that you're creating. So I would say customer company code. And at this point, the biggest thing is you have to say you want to select this, and it's generate and repeating section. This will provide you with a line-by-line ability or functionality to update the multiple entries within SAP. So you're going to click next here. You have your script in this dialog box, and you're going to click finish. So if you go to the form tab now, by default, Winshuttle will create this as a repeating group. Typically, we'll be using a repeating table to handle our repeating web services. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just delete this, and I'm going to re-add it. And I'm going to say import as a repeating table, click OK. So now we have our repeating table with our repeating web service in the solution. Now things to note though is, and the biggest thing is the tree structure. Looking over here to the right, you'll see that here was the name of the group, customer company code, and then Winshuttle will create its own tree structure for you. So it always puts an input, so it's typically the name of the group plus input, and then the repeating content. The next major functionality that Winshuttle will do is create this allow run. This allow run signifies the line item which is going to be run against SAP. And it's a nice feature for multiple reasons. One, let's say, and by default, you want to set it to true because we always want to run these transaction scripts, or we want to run each line item. So we can set it to true. You can notice that it's checked. And let's say, this is a customer company code. We update payment terms and the payment method, and there's 4 line items. 3 of them were successful, but the 4th one errored out. Your data team could then look at that information on the form, fix the problem, and then they could uncheck the first 4, and then only select the last one that erred, and then they'll be able to rerun that script only on that line. So again, it's key to make sure that when you are using repeating web services that you have this the structure provided by Winshuttle. So that's one way of importing a repeating web service into Composer. The next way is, so let's say you've already have a solution, and we're going to and we need to import another script for repeating to update multiple entries. So we would go to the Solution tab, and we're going to go down to Transaction Scripts. We're going to say Import. We're going to choose a file, and then this time we're going to do Vendor Company Code. We're going to select Open. We're going to click Next. Again, we're going to give it a title, so we're going to update Vendor Company Code. Give it a group name. Again, I like to be specific, some type of detail that, again, resonates with the script. Vendor Company Code. And then, again, it's important to click on Generating Repeating Web Service here. We're going to click Next. This way, going this way to import a repeating web service, you're going to see the mapping. We want it to create all new fields for us. We don't want it to use any existing input or output. So we're going to basically leave it how it is, and we're going to click OK. Now, you'll see the structure again. Nothing's added to the form itself, but you'll see the structure is here in the Form Data tab. We'll have Vendor Company Code, our input, the repeating content, and the allow run. So that is the other way of being able to import a repeating web service if you're already developing a solution. And then you can simply drag the repeating content onto the screen, and it'll automatically create a group for you. And then you'll see the allow run. Again, we wanted to set this to true for the most part. So it's already checked for you. So that's how you import a repeating web service, and it's come up a few times recently, where it's when talking about repeating web services, it's you need to understand your requirements up front. Oftentimes, what I've seen is we'll get the requirements. So we'll get this requirement saying that we need to update vendor purchasing org data. So the user would grab their script for vendor purchasing org data. They're going to click Open. They click Next. They give it a good group name, org, and then instead of clicking Generate Repeating Section, they just click Next. They allow it to create the new fields, and you'll notice that by not selecting Create Repeating Web Service or Repeating Web Service, that you don't get that third line of repeating content right here. So the user will start creating this solution, and about 75% of the way through of development, they realize, hey, we actually need to update all purchasing orders, not just one. It needs to be able to update multiple. Now, there's actually no way of going back from this, because you need this structure, and you notice that it didn't create this allow run either. So at this point, it's going to be a rework in order to make this a repeating web service. So it's always beneficial to understand upfront whether you're going to be updating multiple line items with the transaction script. Now, that being said, also a good thing to do is before you even start creating the solution within Composer, it's good to understand, one, the transaction scripts, whether it's repeating or not, but it's also good to have those to start with, because when I develop my solutions, I will take the transaction scripts, and let's say it's, let's actually remove this one again, and I will re-add the purchasing org data one, and this time I'll make it repeating. Vendor test. So I'm importing the script. Before I do anything with the form, I'll let it create the fields for me, and then I had Winshuttle already create these fields for me. So now I can drag and drop these fields onto the form without having me manually creating any of these fields. Winshuttle is doing all the legwork to get you to this point. So I typically, if it's a bigger script, if you're updating a lot of fields within SAP, I let Winshuttle create those form fields for me, and then I use those script fields to create the form. So those are just some things to think about when you're going to develop solutions, and if you're going to be using a repeating web service versus not. Always let Winshuttle create those fields for you, and understand whether or not you actually need that web service to be repeating or not, because if you don't make it repeating and you go down a rabbit hole and you get so far into development, there's no way to go back without actually having to redo the work. So yeah, that is how repeating web services work within Composer. Any questions there? Any feedback or anything like that you want to discuss? Okay. The next topic is going to be working with subgroups. When to use them and the benefit of using them. And for this, I'm going to give you a demo here. Okay, so as I mentioned, I typically live in a customer vendor BP world here at CPS, and when dealing with a BP, you'll have the BP information, you'll have vendor company code data, you'll have sales orgs, all this stuff, and sometimes you need to hide and show certain parts of the form based on certain criteria. And for this example, what I did was I created a simple group for BP information. We have title information, we have address information, and they're all fields, and it looks pretty. PO box, communication. We also have some shipping conditions down here, and this was all done by just drag and dropping fields onto the form, creating labels, and this works. And this is a setup that we've done in the past. However, now we get into this hiding and showing. So sometimes, again, like I said, there's requirements to hide and show different parts of the form. So in this example, we have this request type, and we have two values, tax and sales, for this, for example purposes. And so then we have a rule that's on this request type. And if tax, we want to hide PO box and communication. So we have a condition. So if request type equals tax request, we want to, and then you'll notice that we have all these fields. So we have to hide each field individually. We have to hide the label individually. We have to hide the repeating table individually. And then we also want to show the name and address field too. So that's a lot of rules. So it's one rule with roughly 15 different actions underneath it. And the same thing goes for the sales request. If it's the sales request, we want to show the PO box and communication, but we want to hide in this example, we want to hide the name. So we have to show all the stuff that we want to show, and then we also have to hide. So so we have two rules with 15 different actions And it can get kind of hairy doing all that. So what I've been doing in my current designs is that I've been using subgroups to handle the bulk of this work. So now what I've been doing, instead of hiding individual fields, is I'm clicking on the group that has all the information. I'm clicking on elements, and I'm saying, if you look over here to the bottom right, I'm saying new subgroup. So I have a new subgroup here, and I'm just going to add a spacer so we can make this look a little bit prettier. Go up. Okay. So we have our new subgroup, and the column space is going to be 5, and the column span is going to be 5. So how I'm dictating this off of is, if I go to the main BP information group, the column is 5, so it's 5 columns with across. So let me just move this to the bottom. Okay, so now we have our subgroup, and the spacers in there. That's why. So we have our subgroup, and I'm just going to move this up. Oh, okay, make this. So now we have these different groups within this request information for BP information. So what I start doing is I grab the communication, and I pull it down to my subgroup. I grab the phone number and I just start pulling down the fields that are within this section of the form. So mobile number, email address. I grab the spacer too. So now we have within this main group of BP information, we have the subgroup called communication. And now what we can do is, and then you can give it a header, but instead of hiding all 4 fields, what we can do is, what I've already done is, I have this other solution here is, here's my BP information, and they're all in their own subgroups. And if you look at these rules now, it's gone down to 4. So I'm hiding group that contains PO box, I'm hiding group that contains the mobile number, I'm hiding the repeating table, and then I'm showing the name information. So going from 15 actions down to 4 it's a lot cleaner, and it's a lot easier to follow. The same thing goes for the sales request. I'm just showing the groups and instead of trying to show or hide individual fields, and it makes that process of showing and hiding different groups a lot easier. And it makes it a lot more manageable, because if you have a list of, this is just a small demo, but if you have a lot of fields on the form in different groups, you could get lost on, okay, do I have them all? So in this way, you can basically encapsulate these subgroups within a main group, and then just show or hide those groups. And then also with subgroups, sometimes it can be a little tricky showing a repeating table that's found in a group. Hiding and showing that could be sometimes a little bit trickier in Composer. So what I also like to do with repeating, anytime there's a repeating table within a group, I like to put a subgroup in there, just in case if I ever need to hide it or show that, I create a group, put the repeating table in it, and then basically what I do is I create a helper field for this group, and then I'm keying off that field to hide and show. So if I look at this rule now, I'm not keying off a field within the repeating table. I'm keying off a field. I'm keying off that helper field that I had created for that repeating table section. So repeating table helper. So it really makes hiding repeating tables a lot easier, and it makes hiding small groups within a form a lot easier, instead of having, again, to individually hide or show different fields. Okay. So let me go here. So we just showed the subgroup demo. So any questions around subgroups? I've been using it quite often lately. I think it's one of the better things that's come out with the new releases of Composer. I definitely find it very beneficial when hiding certain things within Composer. So I definitely think it's useful for any future developments or builds that you guys will have. Any questions around that or anything? Okay. The next topic is the copy rule. This comes up when I work with BP, business partner solutions. Within the BP, they'll have customer company code data, and they'll also have vendor company code data. And both of them will have payment terms, and oftentimes, there's some type of validation within payment terms or with payment method that needs to be on the payment terms. And if it's found on the customer payment terms, it also needs to be found on the vendor payment terms. And that can get quite tedious, and I'll give you an example. So I have my BP information, and down below I have this customer company code group, and I also have this vendor company code group. It's the same fields. We're looking at the same thing, and we have company code, we have payment type, and terms of payment, and then also in the same things found in vendor. However, if I look over at the terms of payment, we have a lot of validation. First off, in this example, we have a payment type that has two values, fixed or variable, and it's found in both. And we need to validate whether in this example, first off, they can't select the payment key unless the payment type isn't. If it's blank, we want to validate. So there always has to be a payment type before they can select a terms of payment. And then there's a bunch of all these other validations that a client or a customer or even yourself could be looking at. If it's fixed and if it's net 7, we want to choose a different one, and so on and so forth. So there could be a bunch of validation based off different criteria that dictates which payment terms that a user could select. And right now we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields, 6 rules rather, just on this one field. And it took some time to create these rules on the payment terms, but now we have to do the exact same thing for terms of payment, and that could take some time. And what I find myself doing these days is I like to use the new copy rule function. So my rules exist on the customer payment terms. I want to go and click on my vendor payment terms. I would right click, and then I say copy rules from. At this point, I say terms of payment key, which is the one that's found above. And if I click off and I click back onto this, you'll see that I've got my 6 rules here. And instead of me having to manually create all of them, they're all here. The only thing that we actually do have to change on these is the condition. So the customer payment type, we just want to change this to the vendor payment type. Is not blank. And the same thing goes for these other rules. So it's a little bit of a rework, but it also saves you some time instead of creating all those fields, instead of creating all those rules. So I would just go through here and basically update this condition so that it mimics correctly. Is equal to fixed, and then finish this up. It's equal to that. Vendor payment type is equal to variable. The last one, vendor. All right, so that's it. I've created 6 rules in less than 15 seconds. So it saves a lot of time, and it also you're not worried that if you missed a rule, because if it already exists, you're already copying those rules. So it saves a lot of time in development, and it could be applied anywhere. I just gave this example for payment terms, but the copy rule function is definitely a powerful tool that I've been using lately, and I think it could be applicable to a lot of future solutions as well. Something just to keep in mind when you are developing. Any questions around the copy rule? I think it saves a lot of time. Only thing you have to definitely keep in mind is the conditions, but everything else should copy over just nicely. Saves a lot of time, and I've been using it a lot lately. Open discussion. Any questions? Anything you saw? So repeating web services, subgroups, copy rule function. Those are the three things that I use quite a lot lately in the last 3 years for sure. And sometimes some of those things are often missed, and it could cause a lot of rework, especially around the repeating web services. The subgroups is a newer thing that I've been incorporating in a lot of my solutions just to make things a lot easier when hiding and showing different groups. And then the copy rule function has also saved a lot of time for me. Instead of me having to recreate and rewrite all these a bunch of rules, I can copy and just update conditions if there are conditions. If there are no conditions, then you should be in a relatively good spot with the copy rule function. So yeah, I think those are some good tips and tricks that I've been using lately. Hopefully you can use them in the future as well. So Clear Process Solutions, we've got a bunch of course, every year we have a lot of events. Lean Utopia sessions, WUGs, WebTips. The next WebTips is going to be Thursday, April 18th. It's going to be Winshuttle transaction. We're going to be doing an awesome recording of the FB50 with Winshuttle. Again, I know we have a bunch of events planned for 2019, and I was starting to type them all out here, but then I was starting to run out of space. So I figured when you guys go check out our website at clearprocesssolutions.com/CPS events, you can see all of our events there. And then lastly, if you have any ideas for web tip topics, send them over to the info@clearprocesssolutions.com. A lot of today came from working with other developers and things that I've seen that could help others while they're developed. So if you have anything that you'd like to see, or any type of functionality that you'd like to improve on, feel free to send us a note about it. And then lastly, all of our web tips recording can be found on our YouTube channel, so don't forget to like and subscribe. That would help us a lot. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day and great rest of the week. Thank you. Bye.